Welcome everyone to the September 10th, 2024 Workforce Development Interest Group call. Today's talk, we're going to talk about developing an RCD Workforce Resource Catalog. My name's Tim Middlecoop, and Michael Weiner is my co-chair for the staff side, and we have other folks from the student side as well. Welcome, Betsy. The staff, RCD Staff and Student Workforce Development Interest Group, it's for you and by you. So your contributions and your interactions are important. We do this to help folks out and to facilitate the community's discussion about what the needs are in workforce development. The focus areas you can see there. We also have a code of conduct. You can go to the code of conduct page. It basically says, be nice to everyone. All right. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about the developing a resource workforce catalog. This work came out of the 2024 RCD Nexus Day People Workshop. And we're going to talk about what was done there and steps on taking it forward. So basically the question that came out of that, the people track was, what new resources should we pursue together to support the community of RCD and greater professionals? And this was a full day workshop on developing the resources. And this was the first part of it, which was actually cataloging what's out there. And then later on, they spent some time rating it and discussing it in different contexts as well. So what is in scope? RCD professionals, you, myself, and other folks on the call, people that support and work with researchers in their use of computational and data equipment and software and things like that to do their research and their education and teaching. It's also about high quality materials. There's a lot of materials out there that are not high quality. We want to get some high quality materials for RCD professionals. And this is for training, resources, tools, and other types of things, including different modalities, whether it be online courses, in-person courses, all different methods of or things in scope. What is not in scope is researcher and instructor training. So you can see a lot of materials out there for teaching students and teaching instructors on doing these things. There are a number of things that are directly relevant, or part of the materials are relevant. One of the examples there is the carpentries. The instructor training is useful for some folks. And the materials themselves could be used for newer folks as well. What is not in scope is domain-specific training and resources. For example, artificial intelligence. Just as a shameless plug, there's a new AI facilitation materials working group going up. So watch the announcements for that pretty soon, but that will be specific resources around AI facilitation. And things like chemistry and digital humanities and other things are not covered. Campus or resource-specific training is not included either. So, if there's a call on getting your cluster up and running, that's not going to be included. And the other is one-time and short-term programs. So this is really meant to be a long-term resource. And you'll see a little bit later some of the goals, but it's not just sort of a catalog of events that you can attend. It is long-term things. All right. So what would a resource catalog look like? Well, first off, it's just a list of resources that our RCD professionals could have, but we're going to divide it into multiple dimensions to make it useful, because each one of us has our own unique origin story. Where did we come from? We come with different experiences. We do different things. We could be facilitators. We could be system facing. We could have many hats. So there's multiple dimensions, and one of them is over audiences. So individuals, whether it be newcomers and students, those act a little bit, or those have different needs than individuals that are ongoing or seeking advancement. Teams and organizations, right? The resources needed for a team is different than individuals, and also communities as well. So we put those resources together. And then we categorize them by different types, workshops, self-learning tools, and those types of things. And those are the dimensions that we use to categorize some of the things. By the way, if you have any questions along the line, just feel free to interrupt me. We can have a discussion. This is not meant to be really a presentation. It's more like just setting the stage on what we did. Michael, can you paste the RCD workforce catalog URL into the chat for
Sure.
us? And I didn't test this before. Let's see if I can actually get this to work.
Sorry, I think that first link won't work. Just a second.
There we go. Can you see the RCD ecosystem slide?
Yes.
Okay, so one thing this is modeled off of is some work that I've done over the last few years is developing a listing of communities and systems that are available in the RCD ecosystem. And so they have cards and they have different things associated with them. So for instance, CARC, it's an RCD professional community, has jobs, events, and those types of things. And if you take a look at it, there's also more information associated with them. You can take a look at the table view. And so it has lots of information. The reason why I showed this is it has lots of different tags, and that's what we're trying to get at in this work is to give more information about about it. Now let's open up the workforce catalog here. There we go. So this is the catalog itself, and it has the different resources along the side, and they're all listed alphabetically at this point, but we could order them. And so this is just an initial draft. That's why we didn't send it out to everyone without this context, is because it is a draft. And it's just a brainstorming session that we use to gather information. And the idea is that we can build it into something larger. So, for instance, Linux Cluster Institute, right? It's a workshop. You get the URL there. And then what they did is they ranked them by different areas. So for individual and pre-career individuals, it's number 4, which is a high ranking. So it's important for those individuals. It's important for established and experienced. It's probably not very important for campus and team leaders. And the communities themselves, they're probably not going to care at all about the Linux Clusters Institute as a resource. And then there's some descriptive information as well. So you can see there's also value in the audience as well. So this is starting to slice and dice it up so people can get more information or sort of be more targeted on what the things they look like. Because already with a number of folks in the room, we are able to get 114 different resources. Obviously this isn't exhaustive, but it shows that there is quite a few things there. And some of the stuff is going to be relevant. Some of them is probably going to be less relevant to folks and have higher quality or have different qualities. But in general, it's a good start. So that's take a look of the thing. Has anybody got some observations or questions about or what questions do you have on the resource itself, the spreadsheet? Okay, well, I'm sure there'll be more questions later. All right, so what we really want to do is build the resource catalog even further. So the general idea is to take the resource catalog and to build a framework and a long-term working group around it. So it's not sufficient just to say it's, have this particular spreadsheet and say, oh, there it is. It's going to take a lot of work to do that. The idea is that one could use this to build their own modular curriculum. By taking the different tags and the different pieces of information, you could build your own curriculum to advance your career or to use it as a training program for new people in your group or something like that. And the idea is to have high quality embedded materials for research, computing, and data professionals. All right, so here are some of my personal observations. I've been involved with a number of these resource catalogs before. And the common thing is that, the community will maintain it, right? And all the ones that was a big thing kind of fell on their face and didn't work very well. They often say, oh, we just need a few more entries and it'll be ready for publication, or we just need to make a better interface so people can use it a little bit better. And in my opinion, fancy websites are just a good place for a resource list to go and die. So they don't really survive this. So how can we overcome some of these barriers? Well, I believe we need a framework, and we have a start on that with the different columns and ways of describing the data to make it resources to make it useful for folks. And we need an initial list, and so we have already bootstrapped that. And we need a working group that is just more than maintenance, and that's where you can come in and volunteer is to help with different working groups to help it move forward. So just remember, this is just a proposal. This is what I'm thinking will make it work. Really, it needs the community input in terms of how this would work and getting folks to latch onto this and make it a reality. And more than just, oh, the community is going to maintain it. We're going to work together to make this work on its own. So for long-term maintainability and long-term sustainability, I think we need two things. One of them is a framework, and that is how the data is structured, how things operate within in it, so that we can present a good resource, put it on the web, and those types of things. And we need the actual resource catalog itself. The other thing we want to do is I believe it would be good was to publish a yearly resource guide. So this would be sort of like the top 500. It'd be highly curated and recommendations for the year. And part of that process that you would have to have constantly reviewed and evaluated. And you take community submissions. And if there's a quality entry in the submission, it'll go in the database. It may not make the curated list for various reasons, because you want to keep that pretty restricted. If you've ever tried to learn something like Python these days, everybody is trying to teach you Python and give you ads at the same time. And so finding a high quality Python resource is sometimes difficult. Just as for some interactivity, how about if you know a good resource about learning Python, how about you type it in the chat? Curious to see what we get here. Nobody. Oh, there we go. I see a subscription to O'Reilly, JSTOR. Oh, we didn't see my favorite, though. The Carpentries is there as well, right? Oh, there we got two Carpentries, right? Coursera, right? The interesting about Coursera, there's probably more than one there. So yeah, Carpentries. And if you're not, familiar with the research, computing, and data community, then the Carpentries might not be obvious. And so that's why you want to include some interesting things there. And so not every resource is going to be a winner, but we want to categorize them and get our top picks in terms of the yearly guide. And we want to update the framework over time, right? And so the idea is to get the initial working group to meet rather regularly at first to define the framework and the sustainability and the initial product, and then spawns off a long-term and ongoing working group. And what would that working group look like? Well, we think it might look like that it might we meet monthly with quarterly meets for internal processes, and then monthly for outreach meetings. So I think it's important to get the word out there that it's not just something that's lost. There's a number of resources out there, including my RCD ecosystem one that not too many people know about it, but to get those out there as well. And another thing we may want to do is invite some of the resources to give a 10-minute talk, and we can record those and put those on YouTube and have a discussion on them, and then that can be helpful for folks that want to learn more about a particular resource. And then we can also bring solicitation for new ideas to the people tracks, right? For system facing, we can have a quality discussion as where do you learn, right? A lot of folks can just sit down and, if you're relatively good at this stuff, you can sort of evaluate the quality of materials, but to really understand it, you really need to go to folks that use it from day to day, and they can get the nuances, because sometimes if you're quickly looking over a resource, then you might miss the important things. It may be out of date, those types of things. I once ran across recently, actually, a Python tutorial, and guess what? It was in Python 2. And it took me a little while to realize that and say, oh, wait, print statements don't work that way anymore, do they? Yeah, getting to make sure that they're high quality ones. And that'll be a job of the of the individuals that are working with the evaluation teams to make sure that they're continue to be updated in their high quality resources. So framework structure, what would the framework look like, right? Here's some possible ideas like the facings, you know, researcher, instructor, system, software, strategy, and policy, those types of things. Training versus ongoing resources, documentation, right? Sometimes it's hard to find quality documentation. Modality, in person, virtual training, those types of things, and other categories. So, what do you think? All right, so that's all I have for the initial setup. And so the idea is what types of things along the lines of the working group structure, framework structure, and other things that you think would be interesting to talk about, or what are your ideas to have a good resource catalog, or questions in general? I'm going to stop sharing the screen here.
I have a question.
Yes, Christina.
Maybe for you and for the audience is everyone here. I love this list of resources, and I think my next thought is, how would I use this in my day-to-day life? And I'd be interested in the intent, which I think you did cover a little bit at the beginning, but also just thinking about future planning. I think something that would be useful for me is a couple use cases, like center director or manager is onboarding new admin. This is how they use the catalog. Or someone is trying to organize professional development. This is how they, and actually have like a real example from someone who has used it, would be helpful to me, I think. But I'll open up that question for like, has anyone here have plans to use this, and how would you do so?
I'd chime in. So we've recently onboarded some new researcher-facing staff as well as system staff. Something like this, based on those experiences, would be very valuable, because what we're finding is bringing somebody in that's already completely in the know is very challenging. I think we can all kind of speculate that or empathize with that based on the number of job postings we all see flow through things. This is a world where you don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you about it. So this just becomes a resource to go and find other resources, especially if you're being asked to step into something that you weren't in before. I like that. We've done a couple small cases of what Tim was showing here, from Nexus Day's kind of starting point. And the problem we always run into is it's an interesting, good start. This is when I say locally, it's just our department that's done something like this. It kind of gets forgotten about and then not maintained. And then that just stops everybody from looking at it. So I like the idea of something that's living here, that can look to see when resources kind of fall off at the other end, maybe no longer available, hasn't been updated, so that when somebody does go and look, they're getting, a list of things that are probably relevant enough. I think those are the use cases, is in bringing somebody up to speed, either for their role or in their new element of their role.
Yeah. And I mean, I see the columns of the different community, new career, mid-career, and understand that has some impact on how this would be used, but would love to hear how other people also are thinking about it.
Yeah, I am also interested. Thanks for bringing up some of those topics, Christina. One thing I didn't mention is we had talked about is developing some personas. So getting some stereotypical personas. So you mentioned a manager and that type of thing, and then describe how they would use it, and then what paths that they would take. Or, let's say you're a sysadmin coming in from research IT. Here's the path that you would take, or and one way might be to tag it. So I think that's where the details. Some very interesting conversations could happen in the working group would be to talk about the details of how do you tag it and how would you organize it. So to make it easy, so folks that would, click on where they want to go. My grand scheme is that you could go in and take a little, hour test, and it would do an evaluation of your background and your skills, and it would say, here, this is what you're going to have, right? But that's my, like 5-year plan or 10-year plan. And so this is just kind of one step in that direction of being able to customize folks to be able to learn these types of things. So yeah, the personas I think are important. So you mentioned RCD directors. What other ones did you mention as well?
I mean, I was thinking about the columns that you have of like new career, mid-career,
Yeah.
something else, community, collaborations, and just thinking about, because I think the example Brian gave was definitely one that came to mind. But also, like, I now have members of my team who have been around for a year or two, or in a couple months will be around a year or two. And I'm still wrapping my head around how to do more structured professional development for them. I'm like, this is the raw material, but I need help in transitioning from here's a list of things and here's my people and how do I bring them together. So that's it's still a managerial role, but it's different than onboarding someone new. I think it's helping them develop once they're at least partially established.
Yeah, and the goal here is more for that ongoing training. And I think it's important to look at it like that. You mentioned, it's how people learn also changes over time. Like for me, I just learned Go. It was my first language in a number of years, and how I learn those things is I go to the tutorial and I take those really, something, brewing for idiots or something like that. I do that, and then I dive into the manuals, right? And so knowing where knowing the different modalities, if you want like a quick ramp up tutorial, how to label that, and then some quality resources as well, right? Where folks can know where to go to find those things, and maybe forums, right? There might be different things. I don't, Reddit's known for a lot of things. I imagine there are some communities out there that it's good for, and some communities that it's not good out there for. And so wherever the community goes, like for instance, sysadmins, you go to show the syspros Slack is where you should hang out there, right? And listing some of those very important resources as well. So that's what I'm thinking. So we have those categories, right? The different that are listed there. Facings is another one, and I think it'd be an expanded definition of facings. Is there other categories other people have thought about that would be obvious? Or less obvious? One of the things in the working the spreadsheet there is the relevancy, right? And so that they can be ranked across different relevancies. Speaking of Reddit, one thing might be to do some help the community some upvoting, but that might end up in a poor situation. I don't know. And it also can suffer from the fact that, oh, we got to wait for this fancy website to be developed so the community can magically create this resource for us. So my thoughts are something along the lines of the Airtable that I showed there, where it's got some flexibility and it can just go up. Other tools folks have used to develop and organize some of these things? Everyone seems to be in a listening mode today, right?
I'd just say I have nothing better than what you're doing. We used just a simple spreadsheet.
Yeah, and that's what Airtable really is the
Yeah.
spreadsheet. I think more importantly is the excitement you can build around maintaining it, right? Because when you go out there and you do a search, it's only good for like 6 months. I hate when my relatives ask me, what computer should they buy? Because that means I have to do the research, because after a few months it becomes irrelevant in terms of I'm not up on the fact that, oh, don't buy the 13th gen because it might melt down or something like that. So
Yeah, I think, Tim, that the categories that you've listed already are good ones. And, just to make sure I understand, the idea is that everything can be tagged with multiple categories. So you could see everything that's researcher facing or everything that's systems facing, or you could see everything that's for people who are new in their career. And certainly someone could be established but new to being researcher facing. Maybe they were systems facing before or something, and might go back and look at some resources that were classified as early career initially. But they really have those cross-cutting tags. I think will be very helpful between career path, career progression, career path, focus area, all those different things. Yeah, and yeah, I definitely think you're right that keeping it up to date is going to be important. That there's some work in getting it together. We have a lot of great resources now, thanks to the Nexus Day discussions. But yeah, making it really well curated so people see it as a valuable reference, and then keeping it up to date so that every year it's still accurate. I know we sort of talked about trying to do that in time for PERC each year, potentially, as a way of reminding people that it's there and seeing what to look at for the next year.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it would have as much fanfare as the top 500 that they have at SC.
Yeah, probably not. I think that's probably not quite that level.
And you can't run LinPack on your resource to calculate its power. So I think one of the things that there obviously the tags are great, but having the different levels of your career and then crossing those with the facings and then putting an importance to them, I think is one way to get a little bit more granularity. I can't really think of any other like major things that we should do a cross product on. But there might be other ones that anyone have some ideas where you'd want to say, oh, I'm a new career systems facing, and then do the ratings along those types. And then some of the minor ones would be just tags, right? You could pull out a tag which would be in person, right? Or something like that. That would be less important.
One of the things that kind of comes to mind as you're describing all this is it's not necessarily that this effort itself has to define all those personas, right? You could have a group. It could be a facing in CaRC. It could be some other group who comes in and says, this is our persona, and be able to kind of go and use this to kind of extract out here's the condensed list, right? So it doesn't have to just be this group's effort to go and define all of those. Because I think trying to go in and have the perfect persona for everybody is obviously going to be very much out of the realistic range, but having some good basic ones is not out of range.
Yeah, so are you saying maybe take an opposite approach, as in go and talk to the different facings and develop the personas first and see what kind of things which define their path, and then kind of walk through the different facings and see what we get from there, and then build something more general up? Or
maybe more of what I was imagining was the fact that you have the raw data, you have some reference personas, right, that are going to see some filtered down view, but kind of indicate the door is open for you to make your own persona. Just kind of how you went and pulled the data. Because if the raw data is available, anybody can go and make their own filter, right, and their own result. I think that's an element of this, is they don't have to expect everything to be developed here, right? They could do some on their own if they wanted to. Like if they wanted to have the persona that's both the systems and a researcher facing all at the same time, make sure that it's clear that they can go and mine that data as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. so what you're saying is maybe we write up a description, textual description of what the personas are like, and then provide the query for them, and they can actually see what the query is, and then it provides the list underneath,
Yeah.
and then they can tweak it the way they want to, and so that
Yeah.
they can see the different elements.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a cool idea. We definitely need to solicit, feedback on the relevance or quality of the materials from the different facings as well. So I mean, relevance is you'd get into that kind of matrix of who it's relevant for, which is subjective, I would say, based on your point of view. But perhaps quality would not be would be more universal in terms of subjectivity. And I don't know if you'd want to use a term like that because you don't want to get into not to belabor the top 500 thing, but I wouldn't want to make it into a competitive thing.
Yeah, I agree with the not competitive. I agree with the comments you made before about like the upvoting. I like it, but I see the risk of it, right? I know it just kind of, and I'm sure we can all think of our own versions of this. Think back through some of the searches I do. There's some web pages you go to that's got a lot of information on there, but there's only like 2 paragraphs that like bring the value. And that's a great resource because those 2 paragraphs are fantastic. But subjectively,
you need like a density rating.
Yes.
It's all 100% valuable, 2% valuable.
Subjectively, somebody else could walk in and not care about those 2 paragraphs or those 2 points and find it, very low. So quality still could be subjective. I don't know if there's a way to kind of look back at the upvotes, or at least if you found something valuable, add a comment, something like that, and just express the positive that you got out of it. Right. And then maybe we can kind of lightly moderate those to make sure they're good. So, some way that somebody else can say, I got this out of it. And maybe that gives somebody else confidence. That's the point I'm looking for in that topic.
My concern is scope. And, this has been tried by Exceed a long time ago. It's been tried by Access. It's been tried by AskCI, and it's out of date and not maintained. So, like the example of the Python classes, we have Python classes at Utah. Do I put them up there? They're available on Zoom. Anybody can join them. Or which do I rank, Coursera versus other? So the question is really the scope of how far we go. I love the list you've created already. I think that's fantastic and useful. So the question is, how does this group envision expanding, maintaining, keeping it relevant successfully?
So I'm interested.
That's what Tim is also asking.
Yes, I'm also asking that because I don't want to do all the work because one person is not sustainable. And I too, Tom, have seen lots of these resources come and go, and that's why I'm also internally very skeptical. We did one locally at Mizzou when I was there. It was for on-campus CI resources, and it never ever got off the ground.
Maybe that's one of the very first things to work on with the group is how do you approach maintaining the accuracy of the data, and let that be almost if that's not well defined, then we have big issues to consider.
Yeah, that's one of my goals is that's the goal is to set the framework up. That was what I was trying to communicate in terms of the framework, that you can't just say, oh, we're just going to do it and then go from there. It has to be very deliberate.
I mean, you look at how you came up with the list, right? With this Nexus Day activity. So you had a lot of people together covering a very broad spectrum of perspectives. You got a lot of good information in there. Now you can't just expect the community and everybody just to constantly remember, oh yeah, every time I find a good thing, go and submit it up to this other place. So how do we have some other little events like that just kind of allow things to happen? Is it a BOF at PERC or SC? Is it tacked on to something else? It would take some things like that or different ideas that accomplish similar things to keep the influx of new stuff. Yeah. Curating the existing ones, I think, is a little bit more direct because you just churn through it to see if the site's still responsive. If you can see when it was last updated type things.
It might be good to add one more tag or piece of metadata is last review date. So yes, yeah, I understand the concept is that this gets reviewed every year, but just to sort of emphasize that, or if some things get reviewed or don't, to have on each resource last date that someone checked it, giving that if look, does it still exist? Does the link still work? Is it still relevant? Would be the deeper search. Like you said, is it a Python 2 tutorial being offered in 2024? The relevancy should go down. Just so that someone who comes in and looks at this resource can know, okay, yeah, these are ones that have actually been reviewed. I'm not just going to go find a bunch of dead links if I click here. Yes, the bigger question, of course, is, as you said, having the structure to ensure that a group of people do actually do that review every year.
Yeah.
But showing that it's been done is, I think, also important. I think I don't have a perfect solution to the more general question other than I think what we've already talked about of having a group of people who volunteer to do this and then having the visibility so that people see that it's happening and know that it's being updated, which may also encourage people to agree to help update it.
So speaking of scope, one way of managing the scope would be to trim it way down. How small could you get it and still be useful? Like, for instance, do you just tell the newbie folks that are in facilitation, go to the Henry Neiman's virtual residency and be done with it? Or do you expand it a little bit bigger?
I think there's a real optimization question there. Only we knew an industrial engineer.
I think from the perspective of someone who would be trying to use this, if there were easy ways to clump things, like, and which you have sort of gotten with the tags or could do with tags, but like, here's a couple things that are like general intros to the field. Here's things that are more about, I don't know, but the categorizing is a hard problem. I think I just changed the nature of the problem.
So
yeah, I was thinking more like the size that if you have too few resources, like if you just say go to virtual residency, then it's sort of useless, that it doesn't tell you much. If you have too many, it becomes overwhelming. There probably is a sweet spot in there of you can choose the right tags and get a list that is long enough to teach you and short enough that you can actually read the whole list before you give up.
So ideally, it'd give you the right amount of results for each one of those stories, right? That you
Right.
pick out of the personas. And I think that by having the personas and looking at the queries, you could manage that. So Christina, I'm going to call you out a little bit. You said you had some folks that were, a year or so in. What do you envision their training to be? What, in real terms, what are you thinking? Because hopefully you've thought about that.
That's optimistic.
Or that's why you're here, is to get the answers,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Sorry
yeah, I mean,
sorry to
it
disappoint.
is because I think it's a real gap in our group as a whole. I think we get people up to speed on the basics just through like shadowing and like hands-on and like just this is what we do. And I certainly have a handful of formal resources that I rely on, like, oh, you don't really know a lot about Git, go do the carpentries lesson, or like for specific tools. But I'm at the point now where I'm like, I would like people to feel like they're progressing in their careers, not just learning how to do their jobs. And so a friendly colleague at my university sent like a worksheet of questions. So my plan, half baked, is to have my team go through that and kind of indicate things they're interested or want to learn about. And then I would go to this list and see, are there things here that would be a good fit for their interests or where they see themselves going or whatever. And then maybe make this kind of schedule that's like, okay, we're this period of time, you'll do this activity, or next year we'll go to this conference. That's like my very idea come up with in literally the last 30 minutes at work. And so I'm happy to use it and give it a whirl and be like a test case. It's a good accountability for me as a manager. But that's just one idea, I guess.
Yeah, I could definitely see that working. How many how many resources are you thinking, or not resources? How many, like what type of, give me an example of some of the areas you think that they might like to learn.
I don't know.
You're
So
gonna
I
find.
think either some kind of like technical skill or process, or things related to writing, presenting, potentially project management, leadership, those kinds of things.
So broader even.
A little bit.
I was thinking like with things like learning how to do, do scientific workflows for folks that may not have done that in their careers, and learn some of the tools might be one of them. One thing I just thought about adding uh, to the categories is the intensity. Um, so one thing I did to get ready to be a job as a new director, and I don't know if that helped or not, but we had a lot of people in bioinformatics, and I knew that. So I took a Coursera course on bioinformatics, and I actually took it seriously. I did all the homework. I was up to 2 o'clock in the morning a couple times trying to get the things done. It was great to be, a student again at 40. Not really, but I really enjoyed the process because I really learned it, and I spent that kind of deep, solid hours uh, doing the coding and learning all the things about how assembly worked and things like that. So it was to me, it was very helpful. So getting an idea of those types of things, like how intensive it is, and I think is another category that uh, could be useful as well. Somewhat related to your question, your answer. So, well, we only have a couple minutes left. Any final thoughts? If you're interested in getting a call back on helping out, please put yes at the end of your attendee list, and we'll contact you. We'll also be putting out some other calls, but this isn't just a one-person thing. It's a community that needs to to build it, and hopefully, folks that might be developing some materials could come and go, and when they have something they want to do on their own, they could come and go and help curate a specific area and keep it fresher and things like that. David, did you have a comment? Question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was just preparing to say goodbye and thank you.
Oh, okay.
And remembering that I needed to sign in. So.
Well, thanks. And thanks for coming. Any final thoughts or questions? Well, I hope you all found this interesting. And if you're interested, please put yes, no, maybe on the thing there. It's not meant to be a big effort, but we need lots of small hands to make a big effort happen. And I think this could be pretty useful for the community. I know there seems to be a need out there, and it keeps repeated. People keep repeating it over and over again. So if you're interested, please let us know. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to the mailing list and ask that, and then or to me personally. Otherwise, thanks all for coming, and we'll see you next time. Bye all.
Thank you, Bob.